Hey, thanks for tuning into the DcSoundOp channel. Today we're going to be talking about audio crew jobs. Yesterday I put up a blog post that's the latest part in my gig guide series about getting gigs and how to find work when you're new to the industry. And then coincidentally last night I got a comment on one of my videos asking if I could do something talking about the various jobs that exist on an audio crew, and I thought those things went together really well. Maybe you've heard the terms A1 and A2 before. Those are pretty typical job assignments or titles when you're on a job site. A1 is usually, but not always, the crew lead on the site, but depending on the size of the show, the A1 may just be the lead in the audio department, or they may just be the person mixing front of house. But typically A1 is going to be the crew lead for the purpose of what we're talking about, getting a job in audio. After that, the A2 comes along. Then we have different positions like the ME or the monitor engineer, the BE, which is a band engineer that might be traveling with a tour. Then they would come into a venue specifically just to mix one band. We also have various other positions, including general labor. Those can be folks that just help unload the truck, all the way up to people who assist the A1 or A2 in various roles throughout the actual event. Then we have our warehouse staff, our shop leads, and general labor at the warehouse as well. And those are positions that you may not think of when you think you want to get into audio. You might think, oh, I want to mix bands. But if you have a technical background or an interest in repair, electronics, testing, R&D, that kind of stuff, you may find a shop job to be really more up your alley. The repair department is absolutely critical. The guys loading the trucks and pulling the equipment for each show is absolutely critical. If we get to a show and the truck isn't packed properly, if it's packed in the wrong order, if things are missing, or if it's not been maintained and equipment is damaged from previous events, out on the job site, which can often be in remote locations or even in remote countries, that can be a real problem. So there's a wide range of jobs, literally from the people that stay at the shop and keep things running and sweep the floors, all the way up to the person who's actually sitting behind the mixing board. And just like any other professional setting, it's a team effort. There's no one job more important than the other. And A1 can't be effective without well-maintained gear. And you can't take the time to do that yourself if you're out on the road and touring, or if you're a busy engineer. You don't always get shop days, especially not in the busy season. So we rely heavily on the folks that are in the shop, and oftentimes they know more about the equipment. They've had more chances to test and experiment. They build out the racks and build out the systems that get used on the actual job site. So there's a wide variety of different jobs that have nothing to do with mixing whatsoever, but are absolutely crucial to live sound. So you'll typically have the crew lead who, depending on the size of the job, may or may not be the A1. For our purposes, let's just say the crew lead and the A1 are the same person. This is the person that's put together their crew. They know all the details. Maybe they've been in meetings, maybe they've been on an email chain about the event, but they're the ones leading the charge and getting things put together the way it should be. A typical set of responsibilities for an A1 on a small to medium job might be mixing front of house, doing VOG, any sort of voiceover announcements throughout the event, sound effect playback, either an instant replay 360 or cue cart or things like that for sound effects would also fall in the A1's department. And then if you're doing broadcast video or corporate work, a lot of times the A1 will also be responsible for intercom, distributing intercom and making sure people are able to talk to the right people through those intercom systems. Next in line we have the A2. Now this is not always a situation where A1 is telling the A2 what to do. A2s generally work well on their own. They generally have their own agenda. They have their own whole set of responsibilities, and it's a team effort between the A1 and the A2 to get the gig going. It's very rare that I come across situations where either an A1 is specifically telling an A2 how to do their job, or an A2 is waiting for an A1 to tell them what to do. Good crew know their place in the system, and you know what your responsibilities are, and you get to work. You don't stand around waiting for instructions from an A1 just because they are leading the job. You will obviously get a big picture kind of description from the A1 at the start of the day. We'll typically start out an event with a meeting, so we're all on the same page, but then we all break off and do our own things to get ready for the job. So a typical set of responsibilities for an A2 might be being a monitor engineer. A lot of times on festivals or smaller jobs, the A2 is the monitor engineer. And with that, they're going to be on stage, so they're responsible for all the stage side patching, any crossover patching, any patching between sets, changeovers, things like that. That's going to be the A2's responsibility to handle and then communicate back up the line to the A1. And then a lot of times they'll be responsible for any RF or wireless microphones, because again, those are going to be stage side, so the distance between the receivers and the transmitters is minimized, and a lot of times that'll fall under the A2's purview to keep an eye on those, make sure batteries are charged and replaced, and make sure that things like lav mics are put on correctly as talent enters and exits the stage. So this is where we get into general labor and assistance. General labor, like I said, can be folks just showing up for the in or the out call, which would be literally on the in, unloading the trucks, pushing the boxes to where they need to be in the venue, and then that could be it, or they'll stick around to help us actually set up. At that point, they're going to take direction from the A1 and the A2. We usually will split up our general labor, so if I'm A1 on a gig, I might take a handful of guys and girls to go and rig speakers, while the A2 maybe sets up the stage and monitor world, or vice versa. Just depending on the day and who's on the job and what we have to do, we'll split up general labor between us, or kind of get a plan going so they have stuff to do back to back and they're not waiting around for instruction between tasks. General labor can also be assistance, though, during the actual event. So there's a lot of times where the A2 might be doing RF tech or might be mixing monitors for one part of the show, but then there's somebody that needs to get laved up, or a panel discussion coming on, or microphones need to be moved between sets, or any number of things could need to happen on stage that deal with audio, and a lot of times you need more than one person stage side to deal with that. As we start to get into bigger and bigger jobs, a lot of these responsibilities will fall into individual people's hands. So for instance, the A1 on a really big job might just be front of house engineer. That might be it. You may also then have a system engineer who's responsible for tuning the actual system and controlling all the different zones. You might have your own individual VOG person for all the voice announcements, actual voice talent, who will sit a lot of times next to front of house at the riser. You'll then a lot of times have a dedicated special effects person. Sometimes this is the same person doing the voiceover, and sometimes both of those jobs are handled by the show producer. And then again with intercom, a lot of times if it's a really big show, that could be its own person or even its own department. If you get into wireless intercom and larger venues, that will get taken off of your hands by specialists as well. Similarly with the A2 could just be the monitor system engineer, could just be the stage side A2, or could be just the monitor engineer mixing monitors for that job. And then as you get into bigger jobs, you could have a separate monitor engineer handling just monitors, a separate RF tech. You can have a whole RF department for larger jobs. As you get into bigger venues, wireless technology and intercom takes more and more resources to make happen, and that can definitely be its own department all on its own. And then you might have dedicated people for stage patching on a show with multiple changeovers and big, complicated cross patches, a lot of moving pieces. You'll have folks handling that on their own. So the real story here is, as an A1 or an A2, you have to be a bigger picture thinker. These are the jobs where you need to know all the details, be confident that you know how you're approaching every problem and every scenario in the job, and have a plan of action for how you're going to actually execute getting the equipment out of the truck, into the venue, and set up in the time you have allowed. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, leave a question down below in the comments. See you next time.